Welcome to the cartoon series of art classes. This class focuses on tips and secrets when drawing cartoon faces specifically. Today we'll be looking at helping you to find the shapes of the faces, how to simplify, especially the eyes, nose and mouth, types of ways and techniques to approach each part of the face, and how our basic proportions of the human body help you when drawing your cartoon faces. If you have watched our previous video, we looked at the proportions of the cartoon body, and we especially looked at how cartoons are about basically pulling and adapting lines to be out of proportion and make it look in proportion. So what we're going to look at is we just had a quick overview or review about our body and the proportion of the body and how you use the head to measure into the rest of the body, the quick techniques of the elbows in proportion with the rest of the body and where they all go and how they work together as a team. Now working with faces is quite interesting because faces have their own proportions as well. So what I'm going to show you is obviously while you're busy looking at this video, you can either pause it in between, work with me, or watch it and redo your cartoon at any stage. What we always look for is we look to do cartoon faces in a basic oval shape to begin with. Now if you haven't watched the previous lesson, it is good to have a look at how to handle cartoon bodies by looking at how you approach your lines when you're drawing your cartoons. Basically how you're doing it is we are always restating and fixing our lines by moving our lines all the time. I'm not going to go into that now because like I said it's in the previous lesson, which you get a lot of other tips and techniques for your bodies. So if you look at basically the shape of an oval and of the face, if you draw that first basic shape to begin your cartoon, if you divide this oval shape into half, so more or less into half, and you notice my line is curved, it's not straight. So if you more or less divide that line or that oval into half that way, then all I say to you is you more or less place a line over here where you would more or less place the nose. So what you would be doing is you more or less just look at how far you'd like to bring your nose down, and then you would divide that part from the nose to the chin halfway, and that's where you would more or less place your mouth. This is the basic proportion that we use with portraiture as well, and how the face works together. Now with a face, generally we have a guideline in the middle, which means one side is equal to the other side. We're going to look at the basic shapes that you can use when you're actually applying your eyes, nose and mouth, and how to approach it with confidence when you're using your cartoon faces. So let's first of all look at the types of eyes that you get. Now eyes, if we simplify it, are basically types of circles. So you've got a circle, you've got an oval, you've got an oval slanted, and you've got a straight oval. Now with cartoons, like I keep reminding you, that it's about pulling and adapting lines to be out of proportion, to make it look in proportion. The basic templates of your eyes are basically like that. So what you would do is you'd place your eyes. Now you can decide, because it's cartoons, how far you want to make your eyes, how big you want to make them. So for instance, all you've got to remember is that one side is equal more or less to the other side. So if I want my eyes to be quite big, I can do a basic guideline here, and I can, let's say, place my eyes at an oval shape. like that. Okay, now when you are doing your basic eye shapes, when you are doing eyelids or things like that, what you want to do is you can either place half closed oval shapes. You can adapt and change your eyelids as you want. You can even have little bulges in the front or to the side. You can add, basically you're adding universal shapes constantly to your face. And the main universal shapes we use is our rectangles, squares, triangles, ovals and circles. So whatever I'm doing to this side, I make sure I do to this side too. I keep it the same all the time. I can have the eyes looking inside like that. It's up to you. Now, because cartoons are about creating expression, I want to obviously get it to that point where I make it stand out. So the eyebrows work very well with the eyes as a team. And what you're looking for is if the eyebrows are inside or outside, they tell the story. So I can either have eyebrows, again, extended, basic, universal shapes. Now while I'm drawing this, I can constantly keep changing the shape if I need to, but as long as I make sure one side is equal to the other side, it works together. With focal points on the faces, you can either, again, techniques and tools, I'll explain how you can enlarge eyes if you want that to be your focal point. When you're working with focal points, you mainly only have 2 focal points that stand out with cartoons. Focal points is where your eye goes to first and then moves around the rest of the picture. If you have more than 2 focal points, it completely separates your picture and everything becomes lost. So if I wanted to have the eyes as the focal point, I could then have the nose as either a little basic shape, and I could even have the mouth just as a line. You could play with that and see what that comes through. The whole point is you need to explore, try it out and see where it goes. Now what I'm going to show you is just how to approach the basic shapes of eyes, noses and mouths. With types of mouths, if you want to have a fuller mouth, you could, if you wanted to, if I divided that into half, if I wanted the mouth to be the focal point, I could have smaller eyes, I could have a smaller nose and then a very big mouth. So I could pull the nose up top and have very big lips. Now what you can do is actually go and look at cartoons. Look at where they've enlarged one facial feature to really stand out. I can play with that if I wanted to. I can really see what I can do with it and take it to another place. When I said to you that cartoons have 2 focal points, what you could do is you could take your focal point, one off of the face and one into your hair or your chin or your cheeks. You can see how that plays. And again, you need to just keep looking at other cartoons to get you inspired and see how they've pulled their lines out, brought them out of proportion, and where they've used their 2 focal points. So let's look at maybe creating a big nose and shrinking the mouth and the eyes. So if I again divided the face in half, more or less, and I decided to make this nose huge. There's many cartoons on the television now where you can see where they've really made lots of creativity with their cartoons. So there I've done now with the nose and the mouth. Let's just look at what we've done now up until this stage. Is we've looked at understanding how cartoon faces, how we draw and approach them. The basic proportions of a normal face is that you divide an oval in half. Vertically means that one side is equal to the other side. We divide it in half horizontally, and on that line, that's a guideline of where our faces will usually have our eyes in position. We more or less decide where we're going to put our nose, and then we divide the bottom into half where our mouths would be. You can obviously move and adapt the nose and the mouth line. It's all depending on how you want to approach your cartoon face. It's pretty simple and it's pretty easy with our techniques. With the types of eye shapes that we use eyes that are circles, ovals, all at different positions. That's all you've got to remember. We looked at focal points of making the lips bigger and shrinking certain parts. That's how we work with cartoons. What we're going to look at now is about how to handle your hair. Because if you want to handle your hair at a different point, you could, if you wanted to. If I added to this one, I'll give him a small chin. I'll make him bald, but I'll give him big ears. So now I've made my two focal points on my face. I could even add a piece of hair there if I wanted to. When you are approaching the actual shapes of your face, we need to just look at again your basic proportions of your face and the skull. What you need to understand with a face, a basic proportioned face of a human face, that's the oval shape. We divide the face into half. When we divide the oval into half, that's the line where our eyes are. Generally, dividing it more or less in half is where the hairline is, more or less where the nose is, and where the mouth is, dividing the bottom part. The skull actually gives space. Now, if I draw a skull where you've got your cheekbones and then you've got your teeth. So if I have my skull, I've got my teeth here and that's where my nose would be. I'd have my jawline. On either side, and then that would be obviously where my teeth would be. So why do you need to understand this? Because when you are expanding and bringing out lines of proportion, when you know where your basic cheeks go, you can now expand on the actual shape of the head. So for instance, like this little man here, I've made his cheeks round, but as you see, they come in just under his nose where his mouth is, and then I've brought it in and rounded off his chin. The head I've made small and I've shrunk it, giving him a bald head, and then I've made his ears quite huge. With this one over here, what I've done is I've obviously made her eyes small. I've made the lips quite huge. Now, because technically the cheekbones end by the nose, I could, if I wanted to, add those cheekbones in. I could even bring in a dimple if I wanted to, and then I could either play with it, lengthen it, make it pointy, make it short. I can extend this part here. So I've created the actual skull surrounding the cartoon face. Let's look at this one. What could we do? We could bring his head in, could make big cheeks, and then a small chin. See, he still looks in proportion because I've kept the cheeks within that formation. And whatever is on one side, I've added to the other side. Although the nose is small, I've still kept it in proportion. Faces are quite an interesting subject when you're trying to work with them. They really adapt and pull things in proportion and out of proportion. When you're looking at hair, you need to simplify your hair with universal shapes as well. And the way to approach that is you need to look at it as a person who looks at hair from a distance. So for instance, we will again use our universal shapes. I'm going to show you how to simplify types of hairstyles, so when you are drawing your cartoons, you know what to do and how to approach it. Now let's say, for instance, I've just got my basic face shape here. If I wanted to do curly hair as an example, curly hair, you are literally doing the silhouette, the outer line of the curly hair. So if I had to do the fringe, it would be like clouds, you could call it, and then clouds on top or beneath. And I can obviously make those half circles thicker or smaller. But what I'm doing is I'm creating the basic placement or position of that hair. If I have straight hair, for instance a bob, I could have the fringe. I could have a basic shape, and if you look here, this shape is more or less a triangle shape. Like that. So I'm using my universal shapes to help me draw my hair. If I had long hair, I could draw it the same point. I can either have no fringe and have a long triangle, you can really approach this in a very different way by just using these small techniques to help you achieve your cartoon faces when you are drawing them. We look a lot more in detail at how to shade and create dimension with our proportions with cartoons in another part of the lesson and the course. But for now, just look at practicing what we have learned today. Just recapping, we looked at how to especially understand proportions of the basic face. Very short, quick techniques when you're approaching your cartoons, but dividing your face in half in both ways. When you divide it in half vertically, what is equal to one side must be on the other side. With the face being divided the other halfway horizontally, that is the line where you have your eyes rest on. You more or less divide the next part where you would more or less like to put your nose, and the bottom you divide in half between the nose and the chin, which is your placement of your mouth. That gives you a very basic grounding to understanding where more or less the placement of the eyes, nose and mouth go. We then look at how to handle cheeks and the actual shape of the jawline and the chins when you're approaching your cartoons, and that is especially understanding proportions of where your cheekbones actually go in relation to your nose and the actual structure of the skeletal and skull. We looked at again the basics of how to approach hair with only using your universal shapes, how to look at your focal points on the face as well, from having only two, never more than two focal points. You can even have one focal point if you want. It doesn't have to be two. It can be one. So for instance, here our focal point is the eyes and the cheeks slightly, but the eyes are still standing out quite a lot. When you are wanting to change the positions of the faces, all you've got to remember are just these techniques, these short, quick tools to help you. If you're wanting to turn the face slightly, just make sure your guidelines help you with that. So if I wanted my face to look in that direction, I'm always using curved lines. And my face is looking now in that direction. It's given me a good grounding to start off with. So when I add my eyes in, I can do the same thing, but just make the one side slightly smaller than the rest. I could add my basic shapes in, can still do the same that I want to do, just by changing the direction of my face. I can have my huge cheekbones showing now if I wanted to. I'm changing the position of this little face just to show you how you can really play with this and use your cartoons to come alive. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. I hope you've learned a lot of techniques and my secret skills as well as tools. And if you'd like to obviously learn more, we've got a lot more types of cartoon classes available. Take care for now, enjoy practicing, and see you soon.